Welcome to another episode of Let Go and Lead, where we discuss the new realities of leadership with pioneers, provocateurs, and passionate leadership champions. Today I'm chatting with acclaimed change agent and author Celine Schillinger, who recently released her book, Dare to Unlead. Celine joined us from her native France, and we had a spirited discussion about what leadership today really means and really requires of the people in leadership positions. Celine's passion and frank perspective is wonderful. She sets out a provocative agenda for today's leader. I absolutely loved this conversation. So get comfortable and get ready to let go and lead. Celine, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just so impressed with your book and all the work you've done around engagement. My gosh, you're quite a leader in this space. I should just mention to everyone the name of the book, which is Dare to Unlead, The Art of Relational Leadership in a Fragmented World. Let's start with talking about how you got to your own journey that led you to writing this book.
All right. Thank you very much, Maril. So I too, I'm very, very impressed by your achievements, the scale and depth of your achievement and your journey. And I'm really, really happy to be chatting with you today. So I would say to oversimplify a little bit, there has been four main stages in my journey. A formative stage to begin with my education and my first professional explorations, mostly abroad, mostly in Asia. Then an how can I call it, an integration phase with professional maturity in the business world and emotional maturity as well with founding a family. A stage of transformation then of myself and of my environment, which happened in the beginning a little bit by chance. I'll tell you more about it. And the current stage, which is that of deepening and transmission with the book. Would you like me to elaborate a little bit on each of them?
Sure, tell us a little bit about it. Yeah.
All right. So I'm the formative stage in the first place. I'm the eldest of three daughters, three sisters. I grew up in a close knit family in France. I was raised by humanist, intellectual, artistic parents who are very open to the world. They're great travelers still today. They're 77, both of them. They've been to 86 countries.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they still are looking forward to discovering others. So they're really incredible, and they're very passionate about connecting with other cultures. And I think I got the bug myself, and my second after a first role, I studied political science, and after a first role in a small startup in France, I went to Vietnam to look for a job and stayed 4 years there, learned the language, and had a absolutely wonderful experience, both from a personal and professional standpoint, and then moved on to other roles, still in smallish kind of companies in Asia. I spent 2 years in China, leading the radio business of a French company. So overall, the first 10 years of my life were really, how can I say, very, very dynamic in an entrepreneurial kind of fashion, of environment. And then came the second stage when I came back to Europe and joined a large pharmaceutical company. So I learned a whole new language, the language of processes, the language of roles, hierarchy, etc. And it was also extremely interesting, but many more constraints. And I tried to cope with these constraints until I couldn't. And that opened the third stage of the stage of transformation, where I became, yeah, accidentally almost a community organizer. At some point, I felt overwhelmed with the lack of diversity in this large company I was working for, and I wrote a letter to the CEO to advocate for solutions and progress. And this letter became viral and marked the beginning of a community which I got very, very involved in and ended up gathering close to 3,000 people across 50 countries, and then um, growing beyond the boundaries of the company until it became like an official structure. It's now an official advisor to the French Ministry of Industry, and it got lots of awards and so on. And through this experience of engagement and mobilization of my colleagues, not against the company, but for the company, that's a very important difference. This positive energy for change I discovered, and the power of connecting through social media, digital technologies, and so on. That was 12 years ago already, and that was a brand new world opening up for me. The world of connection, the world of networks, of community engagement. It was phenomenal, and since that moment on, seeing the power there was in this mode of organizing, I went on to mobilize communities in the service of business goals. So it has become my job, and from those experiences and learning from the field by doing this community engagement alongside many other people. So first I mobilized a community against a mosquito-borne disease, gathering close to 250,000 people in less than a year. That was, and it was early, it was very early on, 2013, 12, 13. It collected multiple international awards and became even a case study for the World Health Organization. So it was a big success with awareness, recognition of this, the power of these mechanisms. And then that brought me to Boston, where I took on a role called Head of Quality, Innovation, and Engagement for my company at that time, this vaccine company, where I led a community for quality improvement, leveraging the same, how can I say, mechanisms, this community mobilization, activism kind of thing. And on that initiative, I worked alongside John Cotta, the famous leadership expert and author, and his organization, who taught me a lot about change leadership. And I was also fortunate to work with one of the top experts in living organizations. His name is Myron Rogers, a long-time colleague and work partner of Meg Whitley. And Myron Rogers taught me also an enormous amount of knowledge around living organizations and human systems. And so today, last stage, it's been 4 years already. I've been a consultant. I came back to Europe, and I have recently become an author as well. So that's why I'm speaking about transmission.
Congratulations on that with the launch of your book. So, really, it seems to me that what you're talking about is creating a movement. And this is something that at Gagan we're really interested in because we really believe that it's such a powerful way to work inside a company where generally a lot of organizations think of establishing movements outside the company. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been working inside? You mentioned the quality program is a good example.
It's funny because movements often evoke something a bit scary, like disorder, chaos, uncontrollable something, and um,
Letting
and in a
go.
way, exactly. In a way, it's true. It's true. It does convey that, but it's time we realize that this is not an obstacle to performance. It is, on the contrary, an enabler of collective performance, because the world has changed, because people have been, social expectations, societal expectations have changed. People are now empowered as customers, as citizens. They resent being treated as a passive audience in the workplace, as executors of decisions taken in a higher level. Being treated as robots is creating all this burnout and all these issues, the big resignation and so on, people don't want that anymore from their workplaces. And it's time we realize that those movements, creating movements, mobilizing communities, so calling on new leadership behaviors, but also new leadership principles, is what matters to people. But it's also good for business. And I was really eager to test those approaches to business related topics. I'm not doing that for culture change, because it's not just a cultural issue. It's an business efficiency issue.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, if an organization approaches its business challenges in a typical way, they will appoint a group of knowledgeable people to address the topic. They will call upon experts and leaders, and they will have sponsors and resources, and there you go. And the plan will there will be a lot of planning, a lot of analysis,
A lot
etc.,
of meetings.
a lot of meetings, and the rest, and they will form a nice little silo which will work on its thing, and the rest of the organization will work on their own things. And then at some point the team will come up with something that will then be dumped to everybody else for people to adopt, right? And this will be the time we call on the communication department to create awareness or create adoption. And we will organize a bunch of focus groups. I mean, this is the typical, employee survey, and there you go.
Right.
And this is so old fashioned. People have been exposed to that a million times already. They don't believe in that anymore. It's one more initiative, out of the hundreds that fall on them every year. And there's very, very, very little engagement. There's no heart, there's no commitment, or very little. Um, and I, I have seen organizations really struggle with collective efficiency and performance, and wondering why, but not changing anything to this kind of this way of this operating mode. So then what happens is that the top will blame people below, the people below will blame people at the top, each department will blame each other, and so the blame game, everywhere. And there will be in effect extremely little change, and sometimes the perpetuation of business issues, like the quality initiative I was mentioning before. There had been quality problems for 15 years in that company, and for 15 years the company had invested a lot of money, a lot of knowledge, brain power, consultants, etc., into solving those issues, but always in the same way, from a top down, from a solutioneering kind of approach, kind of perspective, telling people what to do and how to work, and rewarding them or punishing them, but never inviting them to co-create. Because I think maybe we did not think about that, or we did not trust they could contribute enough. But it's not about contributing from a science, a knowledge perspective. It's about creating ownership.
I'm so glad you brought this up because, we're big believers in co-creation and,
Yeah,
as
I
human
know.
beings, we fall in love
Yeah.
with that which we create, right? Not what someone else creates and imposes on us.
Myron Rogers says people own what they help create. And I mean, I keep that in mind, that sentence in mind all the time. People own what they help create. And whenever I forget that myself, because it happens, sometimes I want to rush to a solution, even in at the scale of my own family, for example. Um, well, then it fails. I can see that because I haven't created space for others. That's not good.
What are some of the most successful ways you've seen companies co-create with their employees?
Well, I have seen. many myself with my own eyes because I was involved in them. So it's not only looking at that from an academic point of view or a consultant point of view. It's being on the field in the trenches with the other employees and trying to co-create solutions. So I could speak about this quality movement, but the other another example would be at an airline, which I mentioned in the book, where the airline tried to implement their challenge was to implement a new technology enabling customers to book their shipment online. And they were about to do that and could feel the resistance of their own employees, which felt that this new technology would rob them of their uh, contribution and do some important part of the work in their place. And so they were frustrated and angry and scared. And so the airline management realized we're open to doing things differently. And so I helped them engage the the wider community of employees, those people who had certainly no knowledge of digital transformation or that particular tool especially, but who knew their job and who were the first employees who would be touched by this new system. And I helped the company create a movement where volunteers, people, could apply to join a team. Anyone was welcome. Anyone. That's really important. They were not appointed. We did not, go to the high potentials or the promising profiles. Anyone was welcome, but there was a limited amount of space, and those people created together. I helped them create together a movement where they engage in a peer-to-peer fashion their colleagues. They created all sorts of useful elements for the implementation of this tool and beyond. And moreover, they created a partnership with leadership, with their management team, which was the big game changer because both them, the employees, and the leaders were able through this project to go beyond an us versus them mindset. You see? And in creating this joint ownership and this understanding. And I was interesting to see in one of our meetings one of the employees realizing out loud that leaders were people like us.
That's always such a revelation, right? To
Isn't it?
realize, oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
the other thing, of course, that's so powerful about that is when people see the same information and
Yes.
experience the same
Yes.
situation, it makes it so much easier for everybody to come to the same conclusion. So let's talk a little bit about the title of your book. As you know, the whole point of this podcast is around what it means to let go and lead and how to lead when you're not really in control, which we know we're not. What really is the definition of unleading and how does that differ from traditional leadership?
In my opinion, and from what I've seen as an employee myself and as a manager myself, is that in our traditional approach, a leader is an individual. Okay, it's a person, one person, endowed with particular qualities. Okay, so some are leaders and some are not. Those qualities that make some people exceptional or considered as leaders have a lot to do with assertiveness, with confidence, with vision, with and it makes them, those people, kind of superior. We tend to look for those exceptional people. They are exceptional because of their great qualities. One An executive recently from a French company told me, "Oh, it's difficult to find good leaders today. It's difficult." And I believe she was completely wrong because leadership is not that. I mean, this model has served us in the past, but societal changes, economical changes have made this model completely obsolete and worse, toxic. So we need to move on to something else. So I suggest, I offer to think about leadership as a collective capacity instead, as as something that is as the attribute of a group, of a community, of a network, which is linked to its relational capability or capacity. It's a relational capacity both in terms of technology and in terms of relational skills, and the habits and behaviors linked to those relational skills. And this form of leadership requires a lot of work, but a work of self-effacement. Self-effacement. The leader must first cultivate the relational capacity of the group, of the network in which he or she intervenes, instead of making it obey and march, and instead of standing above it, and telling it what to do and what to say. So yeah, basically that's a definition of unleading, rather than so it's not the big muscle kind of leadership, which I think is completely old-fashioned and toxic. It's deep ingrained in our psyche and in human history, so it's not easy to let go of this narrative, of this fiction.
And of course, I'm really curious about the title Dare to Unlead, because I'm sure many of our listeners are thinking about Brene Brown, right? And Dare to Lead. Talk
Yes.
a little bit about that. I'm sure that that was not lost on you by any means.
He wasn't, obviously, and I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, one of her millions of fans around the world, and this title came a bit late in the writing process, but I thought it was fun. It's a respectful nod to Brené's work, and I found that adding this prefix, this lead, was a way to ask a question, to and make people wonder. Yeah, we often talk about, yeah, leadership development, leadership here, leadership there. Everybody's a leader. Yeah, but what's leadership exactly? And what if instead of fueling this narrative of individual leadership, self all the self development books, etc., aim to for help, or yeah, aim for an individual to improve his or her capabilities. But what if instead we focused on the relation, on creating those connections within systems? And that's why I find that developing myself as a person, as a leader, is doesn't mean much, because I only develop myself as a leader in relation to others, with others, right? And I said somewhere that I've never felt more as a leader as when I shared decision making with many other people. To me, that's real leadership. It's when I manage to create the conditions for many more people to step in and co-create with me, and sometimes disagree with me and argue and make me change my mind, and that was great. Even if they were I don't know, not at all at the same hierarchical level as me, etc. This kind of things, hierarchy, titles, etc., matters less and less. But of course, those who benefit from the higher titles, or from those privileges, have a bit of a hard time letting go. And that's why you talk about letting go a lot, which is critical. It is, but it's hard. It's hard to let go of privileges and of a certain identity, professional identity. What becomes my role and my value if I am supposed to just enable the group? how will I see that? How will I see, and how will my manager or the company see that I'm doing a great job? It's harder. Yeah, it's more difficult. So we need to find new ways, new to assess performance or to support people, that kind of things.
I'd like to explore this concept of the importance of relational leadership and your comment about individual professional development not really mattering that much. And here's what I'm curious about. It seems to me that much of what you're talking about does require an individual to develop in a way that they're able to accomplish that. So I'm curious, when you talk about the creating the relational situation, what skills or competencies do you believe are required to do that?
That's a great question. I remember about my own development in that field. It never happened, or very little, through formal education and through my employer's continuous education system. Well, almost nothing, like a few percent. Most of it happened through connecting with others, through learning about digital tools, and importantly, learning to share my work in progress, which is not as easy as it looks because you need to be open to sharing imperfections, to sharing, things in progress, to inviting people early on to invite judgment and discussion, to spend time on that rather than rush to a solution, um, letting go of solutioneering and instead making the effort to cultivate relationships. But I've learned so much through this. I've realized that I knew, and the problem is that the more I progress in that field, the less I feel I know, because I'm confronted to all those people who are wealth of knowledge, and sometimes it's annoying, but it's annoying in the good sense. It means the field is infinite, and there's an infinite amount of things to learn and know, and everything is changing, and that's great. So feeling comfortable in discomfort the discomfort of imperfection, of in progress, of not yet done completely, etc. I think that's probably the best thing to learn.
And, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about falling in love with that which we create. And
Yeah,
yet, the real power is in letting that go too, right? Learning how to make something even better by the contributions of others.
exactly. And I quoted Myron Rogers earlier, and I'd like to quote him a second time. He has this other maxim, which I find really profound. He says, "The way you get to the future is the future you get." And that's exactly it. It's to me, it summarizes pretty well the uh, the way change happens in living systems. Our organizations are all living systems. They're made of humans, and if we only focus on the goal, what needs to be achieved, and pay less attention or no attention to the way we get there, or believe that the way we get there is so scripted that yeah, let's do as usual, um, we miss the mark completely. The way we get to the future, if we get to the future in a top-down, marching, obedience kind of way, this is what we'll get. If we, on the contrary, go to the future in a co-creation, engagement, creative movement kind of way, that's the kind of future we'll have. We won't have people waiting for instructions, and asking their leaders what they have to do now. Because the current system is not, it's not just that I'm, rebelling against authority. I'm actually aware that authority is being challenged everywhere. So it's about time we realize that our employees are these kind of people, especially the newer generations. But it's also that our current systems put too much work on too few shoulders, and it's good for nobody. Not even, and certainly not for those people at the top.
That's where you see everything creating bottlenecks and a lot of just confusion and commotion. You talked earlier about all the different programs companies launch, and so often they launch programs that are actually competing with one another
Yeah.
or canceling each other out.
Yes.
It's crazy. In your book, you talk about liberty, equality, and fraternity. I'd just love to have you share a little bit of that with us.
So, I was in the beginning trying to find a way to organize my ideas. I wanted um, to paint this giant painting of gathering my experience and stories and inspirations and so on. And I knew there would be a lot of content, and how to organize that neatly and clearly. And then I thought of the French motto, and I thought it was almost, it started as a joke almost. And but then I asked a thinking partner, and I said to him, what do you think? Would that? And he said, well, that will be culturally rooted. So why not play with it and see if it works? And the more I played with it, the more it worked indeed. So liberty is about, and obviously it's not just French values. I believe they are pretty universal values. Liberty is the emancipation from patterns of relationships that do not serve us anymore, and do not serve the world anymore. It's about agency. It's about seeing systems and making decisions about whether we want to change them, to contribute, or to perpetuate them. Some are good, and some, deserve to be, maintained, but not all of them. So seeing systems, in the words of Barry Oshry, is the source of empowerment. If and I would also quote Meg Whitley in one of her last books. Who do we choose to be? This is the question I'm asking to any leader, would-be leader, or any corporate employee. Who do you choose to be? You don't have to be your job title or your job description. Who do you choose to be? And who do you so change starts with oneself, and with this question, and with this taking a step back, and emancipating ourselves from patterns, culture, etc. It's self-empowerment. Equality, the second term, is about connecting in diversity. It's about replacing traditional relationships of domination and submission by relationships of equality in diversity. And for this, I think the big opportunity is networks as technologies, and networks as work principles. And finally, fraternity is what you could also call collegiality, or chosen togetherness. And I believe this chosen togetherness, where people decide they want to work with others because they like that, and they find the collective appealing, interesting, fulfilling. This is the kind of this is what makes the network stick together, rather than, authority, goals, bonuses, that kind of things. It's this shows this sense of common activism. It's shared work, shared activism around common purpose. And for around each of those three, so these are basically three pathways I suggest people explore with their teams, and see what makes sense in their own environment.
And I know you recently started your own organization called We Need Social.
Yes.
Does that use those principles there as well?
It does. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And writing the book was a great way for me to clarify my thoughts. I came out of the business of the corporate world 4 years ago with lots of stories, lots of experiences, and successes and failures. But I felt the need at some point to research, it was almost like a PhD project, research and organize. And in order to have a solid conceptual, um, how can I say, basis on which I can build work with clients. And yeah, it's already been this structure has already been serving. It's a very light structure because I really I'm very cautious about frameworks. I think
You want
frameworks,
liberty.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I think frameworks is a temptation that precisely fuels the current models where people consume solutions. And I didn't want to contribute to that, so I created pathways instead. There's no limiting, boundary. There's no, step one, step two, step three thing. Um, and I have to walk the talk. If I call it for engagement, I need to engage my readers rather than provide them ready to use solutions.
It's really exciting, a lot of the work that you're doing, and it's just so aligned with what we've been doing, so I'm so glad to find you. One other thing it would be fun to talk about is the current challenge is companies are struggling with remote workers, hybrid workers, traditional workers. How does an organization go about creating a movement in the environment that they're currently experiencing?
It reinforces further the need for community building, community engagement, the use of digital network. All this was already present before COVID. I had been working that way with activists, corporate activists worldwide, my colleagues across the world, much before COVID happened. So, and where people were did not matter at all. They were in India, they were in on a production plant in Pennsylvania, they were in Canada, I was elsewhere. We didn't care. What we cared about was this common, this joint, or this common cause we were pursuing together. This movement we had created made a big space for individual connection. It mattered as much as what we were actually building or the objectives to be delivered, right? So building this community, this network of activists, I believe this is precisely what organizations, leaders need to learn more of today.
I'm gonna really dive in on this because I think it's a really important concept. It would be really helpful for our listeners if you could really explain what did you do? How did you build that? Like, what were some, even at a tactical level,
Yes, yes.
what made
Uh,
it work? Because I think it could be an incredible learning for what people are going through today.
Yes, that's true. Absolutely. Uh, Knowing that nothing obviously can be reproduced as such in a different context and environment, and part of the success of this initiative was owed to the co-creation process that happened. It was because it was made by the people that they loved it and adopted it. We gathered the senior executives of this quality and manufacturing department and realized and had them realize by confronting their evaluation of our performance with clients evaluation of our performance, we had them realize there was a huge gap and that it was sort of the cold shower kind of step where people started to accept the idea of trying something different, right? So there was a lot of complacency, and it was important to open up a space, a corner in that complacency. That was the very first step. Then we flew in, we gathered people from like a representative sample of the ecosystem we wanted to engage. The ecosystem was about 5,000, no, a bit more, 8,000 people worldwide, across all our manufacturing plants, and we gathered a representative sample of those people, so different function levels, functions, etc. And we gathered them for 2 days in a single place and brainstorm around the cause. What is it we want to fight for together? And people thought we were crazy at that time to do that, to invest that money into, flying people and brainstorming around our cause, because we already had a company, vision, mission, statement, that kind of thing. But as you know, John Cotter says this is not enough. You need a big opportunity. What is this big opportunity, this window of opportunity, which is open now or is about to open, but will close soon if you don't do anything, if you don't change, right? So creating this big opportunity together, issuing a statement, well, rather long statement, but after exchanging in depth for 2 days in this diversity, was a magnificent first step, or second step if you wish, but the first step of engagement. It created this sort of giant magnet around which everything connected then after, right? And there was no need for a corporate sponsor or something at that time, and even never in the initiative, because a sponsor is, it's very old world. It's an old world kind of thing. Here we created this um, the movement's purpose, and then from that moment on, I went on a tour, on a world tour across the major sites, and had discussions, conversations with people, leaders, non-leaders, anyone who wanted to hear about this purpose statement, etc. I had conversations, and the communication department reached out and said, "Oh, we'd love to, communicate it broadly, put it on the walls." And we said, "No, please. We want this to..."
You want to kill it? Put it on a poster.
Exactly. Exactly. Instead, we said we want to have this spread in a peer-to-peer fashion, in a real peer-to-peer fashion, not a fake one. And so I created from scratch a community, an online community on Yammer. At the time, we used Yammer a little bit. It was not widely used at all. Most leaders refrained from using it, but my manager accepted, was open to learning. So having a senior executive accept to learn a new tool from somebody who reports to him or her is not that common in traditional companies, in highly hierarchical. So it was a sign of there was something different here with that person, with the leader, and progressively we saw the traffic on this little community growing, and volunteers creating local, little events, meetings at lunchtime, lunch and learn thing, etc. It took us about 6 months to reach what John Cotter calls urgency. So reaching urgency is a certain level, a certain amount of people in your organization who have, it's almost like building a political movement. Surprisingly, I mean, to my surprise, that's where I learned one important thing. I was very focused on the goal, in the beginning, solving those quality problems. And John Cotter urged us instead to focus on building energy. The goal would come later. We would have, but we should first develop, create this energy in the system. And so almost like the reverse as compared to what is usually done. You have a goal, you create a plan, blah, 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 and then you create, when everything is ready, you try to create energy around it. Well, here it was really the opposite, creating energy for change. And then once you have enough people mobilized, almost as a movement, political movement or something, then you bring in the goal and say, and ask the community, so now what do we do? At precisely at that moment, we sent out a call for volunteers to form a global guiding coalition or a global team that would lead the change. That would actually lead the change going forward and tackle precise objectives then on in partnership with leadership. And we had 20 something like 25 seats for that in that team, because it was, our perimeter was about 8,000 people, so it was quite big. So we wanted a guiding coalition of 25-ish people, and we got something like 100 volunteers applying. We chose based on anonymized applications, really importantly. We did not appoint anyone, but we chose uh, people on the basis of the quality of their applications, their sense of purpose, their dedication to the cause, whatever. Um, how they said they would work on that, and so on. And we chose a team as diverse as possible: gender diverse, level diverse, function diverse, seniority diverse, etc., etc. And it was amazing. This first team, because the team was in function for a year, and then after a year we renewed the team. We called for new applications and set a new team in order not to burn those people out. And astonishingly, this first team gathered people, so which was born from this process. We did not chose the people, we did not know who they were. This first team came out representing 7 different hierarchical levels. It had never happened in the history of this company to have people from that much, which when we think of diversity, we often think of, gender diversity or ethnicity or function diversity. We would put, we will blend marketing, R&D, and so on, but we almost never think of social diversity and rank diversity. And having this cross section of the company was phenomenally uh, different. It was a revolution, really. And it was what enabled the team and therefore the whole project to to move on, to grow, to develop, being extremely connected with the reality and those people's personal networks, you know.
What's interesting too is, in a way, you formally codified how the organization probably ran anyway. Generally, there's a whole informal network that's very different than people think, right?
Yes, yes, it was really amazing, and I was the facilitator of this team. Those people did not report to me. They had no. They were volunteers. They did that on top of their job. They were not compensated for that, uh, but they learned. They had this visibility, exposure, and opportunities, and we gathered them in person 3 times a year. For some, it was the first time they ever traveled outside of their country. First time they asked for a passport. Imagine the pride and the amount of engagement they put into this project at that time. It was really amazing. And so they came up with new ideas. They supported local volunteers. They really made the organization create huge progress and engaging the rest uh, of the system. The digital network was used intensely, so more and more. And there were all sorts of progress and achievements made by. But this team was not the on. I mean, we had not concentrated agency among those 25 people. They were the how can I say, agitators, or the organizers. They were the community organizers of the broader ecosystem. You see, so we invited people not to submit ideas, but to make things happen, and then to have them shared and replicate from site to site, etc. And what happened eventually was we completely turned around quality, something that had not been possible for 15 years despite huge investments, was made possible through this people-powered, tech-enabled change. And to the point that the US FDA said to us, we do not recognize you. It's day and night. What have you done? It's amazing. Can you teach your competitors, please? and and we made huge savings, huge productivity improvement, huge safety improvement, even although that was not the goal. But you see, instead of shortcutting as usual towards the goal, quality improvement, we took another route, which was we are going to create or to enable a community of humans who care for one another. And when you focus your attention on that, creating a community of humans who care for one another, quality is a natural output of that. Quality, performance, safety, you name it. Everything is a result of that.
My final question, which I ask all of our guests, and that is, what do you think leaders most need to let go of?
Leaders need to let go of this deep-rooted perception of leadership, of impact, and it's so deep-rooted that change agents themselves reproduce it. They some of them want to be the saviors, and being a savior is not is not about enabling. It doesn't enable the system to grow its agency. If the system expects a savior, as we often do in politics, for example, unfortunately, we expect the strong man or the strong woman to save us from problems. So let's question ourselves and honestly, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to save something, a situation, a team, an organization, a company? Am I trying to save it? Or is there a more modest but more efficient way of leading that would be more collective? And for this, well, you also need to let go of this fantasy of obedience, for example. Yes, things go smoother when everybody says yes and marches behind you, but it only works in certain situations and for a short amount of time, and it doesn't enable structural change. And so letting go of this fantasy for obedience, solutioneering also, feeling that because you're a leader, you have to come with a solution. No, because you're a leader, you have to enable people to connect and step up and without fear and with creativity. And all this is difficult because it touches on questions of identity, as we said before, and of course ego. But it's indispensable. This collective and relational leadership, I believe, is our only solution to the immense problems that we are facing: global warming, crisis of democracies, and the fragmentation of the world will not be solved by individual heroes, by leaders. It will be solved by all of us. But it requires us to, I think, let go of a number of things. Reflecting on our privileges as well. Really important. Not easy when we have bills to pay and children's tuition to pay and that kind of things. I mean, the whole system is makes it complicated, but it's not impossible.
Thank you so much, Celine. This has really been fantastic. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Maril. I love your work and I really enjoyed your questions.
Fantastic. Celine believes that we're at a moment in time where the traditional leadership approach is obsolete. Unleading is a new leadership paradigm. So let's recap a few learnings. Historically, the focus on leaders is about them as an individual, leaders who are assertive and confident. However, we shouldn't put leaders on a pedestal. To unlead, it's about realizing that leadership is a collective capacity to be cultivated based on relational and emotional fluency, which is served by a very different set of behaviors. She shared the skills and competencies needed for relational leadership. This starts with making connections and learning to share work in progress, because we need to be open to sharing imperfections and engaging people early in the process, even knowing that we may be inviting judgment and discussion. Finally, Celine thinks we need to let go of deep-rooted perceptions around leadership. Leaders are not saviors. Being a savior doesn't enable the system to grow its agency. Feeling that you as the leader always have to come up with a solution just isn't sustainable. Leaders have to enable people to connect and step up without fear and with creativity. Celine believes collective and relational leadership is our only solution to the immense problems we're facing. Global warming, democracies in crisis, and the fragmentation of the world will not be solved by individual leaders. It will be solved by all of us. I found Celine's passion around unleading energizing in this Let Go and Lead episode. Thank you for joining us.